This is going to be the first in a series of videos I'm going to make. Uh, I have been trying to do this for ever since I started this. This whole purpose of this YouTube experience, video experience, is to um, basically tell my story of my life. I haven't done that, and I started out to do it in the beginning, and I realized it's so complex that I can't just stand here and do it in one shot. So it's got to be a stair step, and it's going to actually be just more or less a biography, a walk through my life. But I'm going to try and explain things that are really out of the norm for normalcy. So we each have a belief system that we live by. And this whole life I'm living is not that way, because it was more or less my purpose to experience a little bit of all of the different types of belief systems, and not to learn the dogma, but to learn the feeling that the people who are in that religion feel, and then to apply that over the template of my life and see how that feels to me, and what I can take away from it and what I need to leave behind. And it does the same thing, not just with spirituality, but you have to move for an understanding to other aspects. You have to understand that history is a memory. There is different versions of these memories, and each of our lives are based upon a history. And so the first thing out of the bat that I have to try and explain is, who are we? Why am I here? And how am I here? How is all of this in existence? And what's real and what isn't real? And what is the definition of real? It's all perspective. Each of us are living an individual dimension, or our life is more than just this experience that we feel that we are in, but we don't understand any of the peripheral. We learn that through our life. But we have all this stuff we're brought up with that until we're about 7 or 8 years old, we are taking in all of these aspects of our spirituality, and we're piling all of this information into our physical being. That is what is going into your brain to make up your mind about the physical world and how you act within it. Okay, so then once you get past about 8 years old, you start now fading out of that learning phase of what it is you live in and how do you expand this life and proceed. You move into the social aspect, family first, then to friends, and then classmates, and then to colleagues and friends and lovers and everything else through our life. Each of these are steps, but each one is a different dimension of ourself, because every time we move forward from the day of our birth, we are every year growing a new leaf in our fractal of life. And if you don't understand fractals, it would behoove you to go look up some things and figure, how this fractal idea and the whole idea of what is it called? I just brain farted that away. Uh, the the side of life that occupies the fractal, the information that is in each of these fractals. So a fractal is like the leaf on a tree. However, you're born with no leaves, no tree. You are the seed that is growing into you, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And spiritually and religiously are not synonymous, because I'm about to tear apart your religious beliefs and replace them with what you need to try and understand. Not that I want you to abandon anything. I want you to blossom into something that can perceive a life from a different dimension, a different perspective, and understand how all this stuff that is happening to you in this lifetime is not happening to you. You set this all up for your life experience. So if you can go through life, when things get tough, don't say, why is this happening? Because it'll start to show you why it happened by repeating it. And so don't do that. When you're starting to question it, ask yourself, what is it I'm supposed to pay attention to with all of this? What is it I'm trying to learn to advance in my spiritual life by way of whatever this social interaction or family interaction or whatever is causing behind all of this? And then you take and overlay another template, which is like the physics of it all. How can all this happen? And the spirituality and the physics and that want of understanding is going to start giving you answers. But if you have the fractal template of being, let's, for lack of a better thing, and fit it into my life more, would be to say, okay, I want to understand why I was brought up in a Christian family, but it was very religiously dysfunctional. The Christianity was more or less a front to fit in socially and politically and even economically with people who you want to be like. So you, like joining a fraternity, you are joining a religion, you are also joining a cult, basically. And sometimes they can run away and get off topic and start creating energy that is not what they were designed to do in your mind. In their mind, that's exactly what you programmed the memory to be doing. Because the dualism of this life, the interaction we have with everything, a positive and a negative, one receives and one gives, but they rotate because it's a vibration. You're going back to send and receive, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, billions of times a second. So it's not perceivable in your life unless you understand what's happening so you can feel it, because you can't see it. Everything in your life, if you can break it down, it will turn out to be all about what you feel, not what you think, not what you do, not what others do. It's all about, how does this feel? Because that's going to tell you what it is you are supposed to learn. And once you accomplish that knowledge, you move on, because you don't take history with you. It's cast in stone once you leave, it leaves the now. So while you are here in this moment, and I'm talking to you, your mind, how do I put this, is creating energy that is going to dictate what happens to you tomorrow. or in the future, far or near, it makes no difference. You are generating a wave through your future matrix that is going to create this particle out of this wave of information and energy into a situation that is going to come into your life. Depending on what it is you're asking is dependent on what it is that's going to come in. So if you say you want to be rich, that is something you're trying to create in the future, but you have just planted the seed. So as that thought gets nearer and more grown into the tree of thought, starts a fractal leaf in the surface, and it gets closer to you. You've said you want to be rich, but rich in what? So now the life, all of these different layers of dimensions that are within that fractal are going to start putting together a pattern that it is going to have you go through to achieve this thing you want to do. So now as it comes into reality, it all of a sudden it is real in the moment. You look at it, it wasn't there, now it is, and this is what you said you wanted, here it is. But now you're going to experience a feeling when you have it that says, ooh, this isn't exactly what I wanted. It doesn't feel right, I don't like it. You weren't specific enough. So don't try to correct it. Move it to the past and regenerate a new one, but be more specific on what it is you want, how you need it or want it. And you're going to find that it will show up exactly as you ask. So if you want to be wealthy, do you want it to be wealth of love, of friendship, of money, of what, how, where, when do you need it? What do you, be specific in your desires. And once you create that feeling in yourself of what it is you are trying to create and what it feels like when you have it, once you get that feeling, you've got it. It'll be there exactly as you wanted it. But it comes into reality, it also enters into duality. And this is where this whole story gets really stretched out, because now, what is reality? If you go with A Course in Miracles, which is a book I suggest everybody read through, or at least take a look at, is supposed to be a book that was channeled to an atheist and then transcribed by another non-believer of Christianity, a book that is supposedly being channeled by Jesus. So the first thing you're going to have when you make a book like this is everybody is going to cry out that it is fraud, it is Satan, it is whatever, because that's the belief system they're currently in. But when you read this book, you understand this is where Christianity went wrong. So there's a battle that is always comes up when this subject comes into play, because our belief systems are under threat, as well they should be. They were meant to be, because you have to discover this within yourself. You can't follow dogma from a religion and actually have a spiritual awakening. You're only going to be trying to fit your spirituality into that religion, and it doesn't fit, because all of the religions are not based on fact. They all, every one of them, turn out to be based in judgment, greed, personalities, and power. Oh, money. So that is why when you study Jesus and Christianity, you have to have the foundation of understanding those books that have been discovered that were written thousands of years ago and buried and now are translated into our language. And we get this new understanding of what it was all about and what happened. And then you also get a whole history that opens up if you start looking at those other religions that our Christianity grew out of, and why it grew out, and when it grew out, and how all of this comes into play with each other. And if you really want a shocker, if you truly listen to what Jesus was preaching in that, not in the Christian Bible, because that was rewritten in the 300 ADs, the 4th century. So everything that was discovered in Nag Hammadi in the texts and in the library and in the Dead Sea Scrolls was stuff that was supposed to be destroyed because the Roman Empire and the Jewish people did not want it read. The Jewish, not the people, the Hebrew church. They thought it was a threat to the Torah. So that whole thing about the Savior returning, they didn't want Jesus to be that person. But then, who was this Jesus that we talk about? Christ is not his last name. And we have this big void in his history that we have to deal with. He shows up at the age of 12 and then disappears until he's 30. We know where he went, but the church won't allow it to be talked about. But when you go to talking about Jesus, he has many names in many countries before he was ever even known as Jesus. He was a prophet in several different areas. If you go to India and you talk about Jesus, they say, oh, the prophet, the Isa. And I have the statue over here next to Buddha. Isa was Jesus, who was in Kashmir learning the teachings of Buddha. When he returned from his childhood of traveling the world with his mom and his uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, he was a trader. He traded with all the way into India and China and all the way up into England. They called him the Tin Man because he had ships. He would go to England and trade goods from the Middle East, the Far East, in England. They were looking for spices, and he was looking for tin. And he would take the tin back and trade it for other spices or other things. He was a tradesman. He traveled. He had caravans and he had ships. The Mediterranean and the Asian market, India, all the Middle East, that was his store. That was his supplier. He was the one that owned the tomb that Jesus supposedly died in. So he has a rich involvement in Jesus. And Jesus has written evidence that he was in the areas all around India in the north, in Tibet. He was in Kashmir, what's now Islamabad, Pakistan. He was in Afghanistan. He was all over, learning on the trade route with his uncle and his mother. And if you go today to Kashmir, you will find stories and an actual grave that is said to be Jesus in Kashmir. You will also find a grave outside of Islamabad in Maree, which is the town name for Mary, who is buried in Maree. But it is all disputed territory. It has been for a long time. And you can't just go in there and go say, where's Jesus' grave? Because they have hidden it. They fenced it off, and you can't enter, and you won't be allowed to, but you can go see it. But it's a war zone. So you have, it's not easily done. And it has always been under threat because of protection between the Muslims and the Indians about this sacred ground. Isa is Jesus in the Hebrew world, or the Hindu world. And in the Muslim world, it's Isha. He is also the prophet Isha in the Muslim Quran. That is Jesus. There is stories there about Jesus. And Christ is not his last name. It is that energy that he is teaching, and he called it the way. So if you find the way, you don't have to have a church. You are the church. This got him crucified. It was tyranny within the Jewish faith. So he got crucified for 3 hours. Normally it was 3 days, and you died. He didn't die there. They took him down without any of the process that they normally would do off of the cross. They took him into Joseph's tomb. He then disappeared. And he shows up on the road to Damascus. He shows up in front of all these people. He has risen from the grave. Yeah, he did. He didn't die. He had a near-death experience. And we all, actually, at some point, you're going to understand that the soul does not need to rest. It never stops. Your soul is active 24/7, 365 for eons and eons of time. It just resides in the body to experience the feelings that are in the body. But every night, you don't need sleep. The body needs to recharge. We get out of the body. We are now experiencing heaven again. We have moved from this frequency to that frequency. And to get out of this life, that's the only way you can do it. Physical is one frequency that creates what we would call solid material. It is visibly there. It is physically there. It's solid. So you can take all of that information and you create all of this out of that physical energy. But it isn't us. The body is just the sensors, like the rover on Mars. It's feeling everything. We come in to experience that feeling and take it back with us. Because believing in heaven is something that's real. In the Course in Miracles, when you start out, if you read the preface, one of the first things it says is that nothing real can be threatened. So if it's real, you can't threaten it, you can't destroy it, you can't make it go away, you can't change it. It is real. And the second line says that, okay, so nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. So put that in your head. Whatever is real cannot be harmed. Nothing can hurt it. It's your soul. But nothing unreal exists. So everything else other than your soul doesn't exist. It is a construct of your own being to live in this frequency that creates all of this 3D and 5 levels of consciousness, 5 levels that are communicate through the physical. So our 5 senses operating within this physical realm. We are that robot that got sent to Mars, and we're just rolling around in this bad atmosphere that humans can't live in, experiencing it. Okay, so then we send back the information to Earth. Well, we're doing that same thing. That is a metaphor for what's happening here. We are experiencing all of this, and we're packing it all up, and we're sending it back with our soul every night to download our feelings into that higher self. This is what it feels like, because in what we call heaven, I guess, that real is that cannot be threatened or destroyed. In that realm, all of this is just feeling. And where we come from, everything is always good. So in order to feel, you have to have something that isn't good to judge the good by. So you create this duality, this negative pushback on everything. Okay? We walk through the atmosphere on Earth, but we don't float off into space. That's because we have gravity. Life needs gravity. You have to have an anchor to keep you in the dream, in the movie, in the script. It is a matrix, but it's a matrix that is created within that, what is it? We have a fractal that we live in. Like I said, like we are the tree that is sprouting the leaves, but the tree is just this life. There's a whole forest, and we're not the tree, just the tree. We're all the trees. We are the earth that the tree is anchored in. We are the roots that go down. As far as the tree goes up, the roots go down. As wide as they are, they go down. The tree and the roots is the same in duality. One has to be attached to the other for it to function. The roots take all the energy from the ground and bring it up into the tree and break it down. It expels the oxygen, which helps everything else grow. But it brings in the carbon dioxide, and through photosynthesis, it creates matter that then mixes with the hydrogen from and what else from the ground, the water that it brings up and carries all the minerals. All of that gets dispersed in the tree, and all of the oxygen gets released into the atmosphere. So the carbon dioxide in the air goes in, gets recycled, and comes out. It is a breath. It draws water from the roots, but breaks it down in hydrogen, because you can't lift that water up through that tree if it's still water. But you can move the hydrogen among all of the branches, all of the tree, all of the leaves. Can get the hydrogen and mix it with the carbon, and the tree now in photosynthesis creates new branches, new roots, new leaves throughout it. But the tree is the frequency that makes it solid and brings it all together, that creates that structure that we see. But you can only see the tree. You can't see the root system, but it's down there. And it is actually as big as the tree in volume. It has to support the tree that is up in the gravity. So, like I said, this gets really involved. This is pretty long, a half an hour or so already, I think. I'm going to let it go here, and we'll hopefully pick it up on the next one. So I hope it all makes sense. It will in the end if you stick with it, but let's see. Have a good one.